What personal qualities and behaviours do you think define leadership?
If you put yourself above your team, you will not be successful. I think you have to remember that the team is more important than you. I'm always interested in how things can be done better. Whether it's from small things like how you prepare and organise for meetings, or whether you should have meetings in the first place, to how you organise the company overall. So that curiosity, I think, is critical. The fundamental thing to see success, I think, is determination.
What are you most optimistic about?
I've got so much positivity about the creativeness of the humankind. And, we see now ChatGPT and other, AI technology that's taking off.
Ivy and Gecko acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and future. Today we're joined by David Boshoff, a seasoned leader with more than 20 years' experience across iron ore, coal and industrial minerals. From major developments in South Africa and Australia to his current role as Managing Director of BCI Minerals, David is now steering the Mardie Project, Australia's largest salt development. This is a grounded conversation on leadership, strategy and creating long-term value at scale.
David Boshoff, welcome to Hearts and Minds.
Thank you, David. It's great to be here.
Good to see you again. And for the benefit of our any new listeners to the podcast, this program is all about leadership and its impact on stakeholder engagement and the development of culture, particularly within a mining business context. So we invite people like you, executives and company directors, to share some of their experiences and offer some insights which hopefully will be a benefit to other people. And along the way, David, we'd like to probe a little bit and uncover some of your personal stories and reveal something of your inner thinking and how you've developed your perspectives. So with that in mind, let's perhaps start with your backstory. What can you tell us about your early years?
Yeah, it's interesting, David, reflecting on where you come from. I don't think it's often that you stand still and think about, what you thought about life when you were, a teenager. But just, I guess, thinking through what I will talk about today, I grew up in early days in a town called Rustenburg. It was, back then, it was tobacco and citrus farming. Life was not that fast, and I enjoyed it. I didn't care much about school or anything in my primary school days.
Now, this is in South Africa, David?
That's in South Africa, yeah, that's right. So about 2 hours west of Johannesburg.
Right.
And, I think, I had more interest in playing with my mates and spending some time outdoors, which I think is important, in early childhood. I also didn't, we've got two little kiddies and they go to pre-primary and then, all these sort of preschool. I didn't start doing any schoolwork until I was about 7. And so that's quite different to these days. And I've often wondered how did that change or shaped my thinking. We often put so much pressure on kids these days. And I feel like it had no influence. But I think, where things changed for me was a little bit later on in high school. And then I think it was very much coincided with my interest in sport. And so I think it was about grade 9 where I started to take real interest in sport and particularly athletics and rugby and those kind of sports that most of my friends were involved with. And at the same time, my academics started improving. And then when I started seeing the early improvement, it really sparked my interest to get more involved in it.
You've mentioned sport a couple of times. Tell me, your preschoolers, have you converted them to AFL? Are they West Coast Eagle members?
Yeah, I can't say that. There is some. I still have some of my friends from university and school days that's actually now in Perth. Some of them do follow AFL. Most of us, of course, grew up with Union and Union. And I've also enjoyed a fair bit of NRL, on the East Coast. We spent a lot of time in Townsville and sponsored the Cowboys, the company I worked with. So I spent almost every home weekend in the box with some guests, and that sort of grew my love for that sport as well.
We mentioned off air that a good friend of mine is John Wellborn, a former Wallaby, and WA's first Wallaby, in fact, who's now the Managing Director of Phoenix Resources. So I look forward one day to introducing you to John, and you can swap war stories about the Springboks and versus the Wallabies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm delighted lately to see the Wallabies are playing much better, and I'm looking forward to the World Cup. It's going to be on our shores very soon.
Outside of your immediate family, was there somebody that was a big influence on your thinking as a teenager or a young adult?
I think my answer might surprise many of your listeners, but it was actually a school teacher. And I had a school teacher, Mr. Murray is what we called him. And he was actually also my athletics coach. And I think the combination of spending some time with me outside of school and coaching me in athletics, that also helped me to lean a lot on him in career advice later on. So he had a big influence in my career choices and supported me later on. And it felt like, I still keep in touch with him. While he was a teacher and in himself, I think a great leader of children, of kids, of young adults, and being able to help us with good choices. So yeah, he was a really cool person to be around and a very insightful coach.
I often think the best sporting coaches are those who not only are effective in terms of developing the technical skills of athletes or footballers, but those who take a really keen interest in the heritage and the upbringing of these sports people. I'm thinking of Bennett, the rugby league coach. Now, he is famous or renowned for his ability to get very close to his people and evolve the human being in front of him, not just the technical skills of a footballer.
Yeah, I think the passion, the personal passion brings a connection. And I think that connection brings ownership and responsibility. So, what I felt to Mr. Murray is he spent a lot of time trying to show me how to do things better, whether it was training in the sports field or whether it was, studying for an exam. And it was almost the sense of that the effort he spends on trying to help me to improve should be rewarded by my own effort and interest in doing so. And as soon as you start putting any effort into something, you get better. And those early results motivate you to continue. And I remember a very pivotal conversation. We were training. It was sort of my early days of just starting to get fit for the season. And I had a mate of mine who was a much more natural athlete than I was. And we were training 800 meters, I think it was 800 meter sprints. And he was easily beating me. And I remember in that, Mr. Murray must have seen that I'm a little bit dejected in my results. And he said, don't worry, just give it a couple of months and you'll beat him. And it was amazing. That little conversation still stuck with me. And sure enough, a couple of months later, I was very diligent in my training. This mate of my natural talent, but not so diligent in his training. And it was actually a foregone conclusion at that point. But I didn't see it at the time. Yeah. But just that little motivation helped me a lot.
So he served as a bit of a catalyst for you and a source of inspiration to go the extra yard to realise your potential.
That's right. I think it's someone who sees a bit more in you than you saw in yourself at the time. And then once you see a bit of results, cheering on, being a cheerleader for those results, and then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's a very good point. I often think, of the analogy between elite sports teams and business teams. And particularly, I think of the All Blacks. I read a book, you probably read it too, David, Legacy.
Yeah.
A powerful book. I'm not a huge fan of union, but I appreciated the power of the bonding between these members of the All Blacks. So much so that beyond off the sporting field, they had a code of conduct. For example, at the end of a match, they'd go back into the dressing room, irrespective of the scoreline, and they would, each of them, clean up the dressing room. So it wasn't beyond them to pick up the rubbish and tidy things up. It was wearing the Guernsey and taking huge amount of pride in what you're representing. And it always stayed with me, that powerful bond.
Yeah, and I think there's a sense of that individuals are not more important than the team they're playing in.
Yes.
And that your be that your hierarchy or your, if you're a seasoned senior player, that you don't become more important than the rest of the team and the success of the team. And I think it links to leadership as well. So, one of the things that I probably use the word hate more than anything is symbols of hierarchy in businesses. And I'll use a couple of examples. So in an office would be the name of the managing director on his parking or his or her parking. That's something I absolutely dislike, strongly dislike. because it gives you a sense that that person must be more important than other people in the business, which is absolutely not true. So one of the first things that I did at BCI was absolutely just got rid of any allocated parking. Everyone has to book into their parking, and it's first come, first served basis. There's so many more symbols, in mine sites in the Pilbara. Classic example of that is a Land Cruiser or a Toyota Prado that the supervisor or a leader or manager needs to drive around. When I go to site, I choose a Hilux. And it's just, I think those are really important things to demonstrate, to your people and actually for it to be real that you're not more important than them. Actually, they are making a bigger contribution than you are. And making sure that you get rid of those symbols, the big offices. We've got open plan. I used to have a big office for the first month and then got rid of it. I think those things are things that can help you to stay connected to the...
Yeah, I love it. It's about humility. And it's also, I think, about sharing your vulnerabilities as an individual, even though you might be the leader of the team. Talking of the car park example, I read a book by Lee Sales, the ABC journalist or former ABC journalist who fronted 7:30 for a while. She tells the story in the book about the chairman of the ABC, Ita Buttrose, having a very allocated car park spot in the Sydney headquarters. And Lee Sales parked there one day because she was in a bit of a rush. She needed to get into the studio to record an episode of 7:30, and Ita's space was the only space available, so she parked there and was absolutely castigated afterwards in a meeting with the chairman. And Ita laid the law down and say, under no circumstances, meeting a program deadline or not, will you ever park in my spot again?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so much to it. And it's interesting, if you read this, there's a very good book on good to great. So,
yes,
Jim
Collins.
That's right. And it's just there's the differences, the small 1%ers in different leaders. And I think it's critical that how you make people feel when they're at work and their importance is actually critical in the company's performance. And we'll talk a little bit more about values along the podcast. But I think that underpins how people feel when they come to work. They understand their importance, and that there's not a hierarchy where you are more important because of the title you hold. Everyone is more important, is equally important because of the contribution they make to the company.
Yes. Yeah, well said. Will you share something about you that not many people know?
Well, yeah, it's interesting when you are in a leadership role and leading an organisation, and it might seem like perhaps someone is earning well and so on. I grew up in a very, very poor house. We were 4 kids, and we didn't have always food for everyone all the time. I remember very, very clearly where my dad said to us, well, for the next couple of days, it's going to be maize meal for your meals, and that's it. So both teachers, growing up, both teachers, four kids, and we had 4 teenager boys in high school at the same time. So three hungry boys and a younger sister. And I often reflect on that, having to wear each other's clothes often. You want new shoes, but it's not available. You've got to wait for a couple of months. So while at the time it was quite trying, and one could feel, I guess, as a child growing up that you don't have all the opportunities. In fact, I see that quite different. I think that creates resilience, and it creates determination that no one can teach you, because you're in that situation where you make a decision of what you want to become, what you want to do with your life, how you want to set up your own children. That becomes something that's, I think, quite unstoppable for people who are determined to make a different life. And I think that's often for foreigners in Australia. I'm so grateful to be in this country. I think this country has got so many blessings for anyone who is willing to work. And you see it often where people who come from, more difficult circumstances become successful in the end because they know what it's like not to have anything. So I think that's sort of been a big inspiration for me.
You've raised some really interesting points there. I read a book, I read a lot of books. Ray Dalio wrote a book called Principles, and in there is the formula pain plus reflection equals progress. What he's saying is that you do need a degree of suffering and pain in order to build character. to become resilient, and to appreciate the value of things that many other people take for granted. You're well educated in terms of formal degrees. Knowing a little bit more now about your upbringing, were your siblings university educated? Because that costs money. What was your situation there?
Yeah, it's also something I've reflected on. Again, in Australia, we are very blessed in that space. If you want to go to university, you probably can. There's lots of different ways to do it. In a country like South Africa, it's a bit different. There's no government funding for going to university.
Right.
It probably would have cost my parents at least half their annual salary to put me through, and we've got 4 kids.
Yeah.
So I remember very distinctly I think it was grade 10, my dad said to me, if you want to go to university, you've got to pay for it yourself. You've got to find a way. And, as a child, you don't have any income. How do you do that? And so one of the decisions I had to make is I had to find out, how do you pay for university? What are all the ways to do it? Because I wanted to go and study. I was always interested in maths and science, and I was really keen on doing some form of engineering degree. At the time, I didn't know exactly which one. And I realized then that the only way for me to do that is to get a sponsorship through an organization, a company that sponsors your university degree, and then, found out a bit more about that, and that's eventually how I went through university.
And which company was that, David?
So Anglo-American was the company who put me through university. Back then, it was their platinum division. It was called Amplats before Anglo acquired it. But yeah, in the end, it was Anglo. And I'm forever grateful. That organization has helped me. I mean, ultimately, that helped me to get into Australia. Without the mining engineering degree, I wouldn't have been here. So super grateful. And yeah, the other children, not all of us went to university, but 2 of us got sponsorship from mining companies, myself and my little sister. She's a chemical engineer. Middle brother, my parents helped him with a loan to do. He's an actuary. He was able to go through university with that. And my youngest brother didn't end up going to university, but started his own business. So all followed a slightly different path.
Fabulous. What year did you arrive in Australia?
I came to the country in August 2010, so it's about 15 years ago. And yeah, as I said earlier in the conversation, I feel like Australia has got so many opportunities, and I just feel so grateful. I came as a business improvement specialist 15 years ago, working for Anglo in the coalfields in Queensland, and yeah, I just had opportunity after opportunity, and really feel super grateful for where I can be today.
I asked my other South African-born guests, to what extent did the practice of apartheid affect your youth and your thinking?
I was still young, in 1995 when things changed significantly. I was I think I was finishing primary school. So it was something that I was not very much exposed to. We didn't grow up with television or radio in the house. So, what I knew was from my friends and perhaps my parents. So yeah, I didn't know much about that. But when, after 1995, of course, when they had the World Cup, rugby, that was a big deal, and everyone was involved in that in the country. And then the voting for democracy happened. I didn't know much about that as a child. I probably didn't care too much about it. But then reading back on it, then the puzzle pieces starting to come together. So yeah, interesting times certainly for the country. And I think personally, I do think a civil war was avoided. I think that would have been almost inevitable had the leadership not come together in the country.
When you're not concentrating on your work, how do you relax?
I love spending time with the family. I'm a person who loves being outdoors. So camping with the kids is always good fun. We also enjoy a bit of activity. I do like being active. So going for a cycle with the kids in the hills has been good fun. They are now old enough where they can at least cycle a little bit with us or join us on a bicycle. So that's good fun, or walks or those sort of things. So yeah, being active outdoors is what I enjoy.
Great. Let's talk about leadership effectiveness. What personal qualities and behaviours do you think define leadership? And, as a follow-up question, to what extent can these personal qualities be learned and developed?
Well, I think in the first instance, we spoke a little bit about humility, but ultimately, if you put yourself above your team, you will not be successful. It might last for a little while, but it's not a sustainable way to engage with your team. So first of all, I think you have to remember that the team is more important than you. The second item is, I do enjoy a bit of relentless curiosity, my team would probably say. I'm always interested in how things can be done better. Whether it's from small things like how you prepare and organize for meetings, or whether you should have meetings in the first place, to how you organize the company overall. So that curiosity, I think, is critical. And then the fundamental thing to see success, I think, is determination. It's not IQ or how smart you think you are, or talents or anything like that. I think it's just having that determination that we will see the team successful, and I'm going to continue to do my part to help this team to have a win.
Very interesting. You mentioned collaborating with people. I think one of the key promises that a leader needs to make to his team or her team is that he needs to clarify the purpose and the values. People need to be inspired to start a journey with a leader, and they need to be hopeful that certain goals can be achieved. And those goals, I think, David, need to be beyond earning a salary and making a corporate profit. They need to be deeper than that and richer than that. I think many candidates that I speak to at the senior management and executive level, sure, they need to earn a competitive salary, but they need to be on board with a company that is making a difference to the local community or the global situation. And I think increasingly companies need to look at the value proposition that they're pitching to very talented executives and managers and ensure that they are appealing to those people in the right way. You mentioned determination there. Absolutely, I think people need to show that they have grit and that they are prepared to sacrifice for others. And I often think of a formula about trust. The equation goes: trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy with people divided by self-interest. In other words, if you show up and you demonstrate that you're good at what you do and you know what you're supposed to know, that you follow up and you're reliable, and that you have a personal connection with somebody and you're genuinely interested in their welfare, and if you're prepared to sacrifice your interests, at least in the short term, to help other people grow, that is a really good environment to cultivate trust. And trust really is the essence of why people follow you as a leader, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to what you said there, David. I think I might talk about two parts of it. So I think the first part is the genuine interest. So as a leader, being genuinely interested in what people are doing and what they're contributing to the organization, and genuinely cheering when they have success. And so I'll give you a small example that happened just last week. We've developed at BCI a model, a digital twin of the organization that helps us to understand the operation better. And one of the team members comes from a trade background, and he's helping now in the planning division. And he presented to us as an exec team on how this model is working. He's the operations planning guy. And it was his first presentation to us as a leadership team, and he had prepared cue cards. And he was sitting in the meeting room going through his cue cards. And it just gave me there was just such a proud moment, seeing someone who took such ownership of that and such passion about what he was doing, created such a sense of satisfaction for me. And he was a tradesperson not long ago. 3 years ago, he was a tradesperson in the team, and we've promoted him twice now. He showed good interest. And I know that he's building a pool at his house, and he shows me photos of how he's progressing and he's building contract and how he's negotiating with a contractor and so on. So we have that chat around the office. And then to see him putting so much effort and personal time in preparing for a presentation to the exec was just so rewarding. And I think having those two things that I know Danny, I know his personal life, I know things about his personal life that he's willing to share. And then I see him having so much joy. And I mean, he bleeds BCI, and that creates such passion. And I think as a leader, you have to create two things. You have to hire competent people, and for them, you have to give them clarity. What's the clarity of their role and their objective? And I might just link that. I've got here with me a red footy. Now, that's of the code that you'll be familiar with.
It's been kicked a few times, I can see.
Been kicked a few times. So Sharon from our local code. And what this represents is the person holding this footy has got the most important task in the business at that very moment. We call it the critical path footy. And so the objective is like you in the footy game. The person with the ball is the person you need to know where they are. You need to know when you should be able to be ready to receive. You should understand the game, understand which direction we're playing, and be ready to get the footy. And what I think the most frustrating thing for people is if they work really hard, but they've got no contribution or no effect on the overall outcome of the game. And my example would be is, someone runs up very hard up and down the sideline, get themselves out of breath, runs the whole game, burning legs, but didn't know where the footy was, didn't know how the game, didn't even know what the scoreboard was saying. So I think as a leader, you have to provide that clarity to understand what's my role, how did I contribute to the result of the game, and are we winning or we're not winning? And I think those elements creates that ownership and passion that I described about Danny. He knew what he was there for, he knew what his role was, and he understood how he's going to win that game that he's involved with. So I think those two elements are critical.
I love the way you explain that. The analogy is visual and it's powerful. Connecting with that, I lived in Sydney like you for a while. I put up my hand to be the coach of the St Ives under-8s AFL team. Not particularly talented group of kids, including my own, were in that team. But I saw, during the course of a 12-month period, I saw a child, an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old kid, who was reluctant to want to have the ball in his hands. I could see in the early games that he looked as though he was trying hard and he was running around a lot, but when the ball came near him, he either fell over or found a way not to take possession of the ball because he lacked confidence that he could execute the skills well if he did get the ball. Toward the end of the season, I saw this kid want to have the ball in his hands, and he would work really hard to grab it. When he did get it, the execution still wasn't brilliant, but he enjoyed it so much because he wanted to be a part of that team. And I think, that's my way of saying what you've said in your very good way, is recognising people's contributions and celebrating their victories and having a very personal relationship and connection with people, not just while they're at work, but in their domestic lifestyle situation as well. And the smaller the company is, I suppose, the easier it is for a leader to have those personal connections with all of the staff. In bigger companies, you become a bit of a number, the bureaucracy and the hierarchy grows, and it's a bit more impersonal, I think.
Yeah, that's a good observation, David. Of course, as you noted earlier, I did spend a lot of time in Anglo and in BHP in my early parts of my career. I think that's very true. At a global scale or a total company scale, that's quite true. I do think it's still possible in a team size. So, I was general manager at Mount Arthur. We were 2,000 folk on the site, about just over 1,000 direct employees. And I remember when I started the first 2 weeks, I attended 53 pre-starts. Morning, afternoon, morning, evening for about 2.5 weeks to get through everyone. And that was the only way I could see everyone. So I agree that it is more difficult, but it's still possible. And so on Fridays, I would go and drive a bit of truck, do some hot seating in the afternoons, even as a general manager. I would go to the crib room, go and chat to some people, rotate around. While you won't know everyone at the same level that you might in a small organization, I think word gets around if you are able to get out and not get stuck in your office. I think that's still important. And then it's not only the people you've interacted with directly, but also the people they talk to about that interaction. Because it's uncommon. Unfortunately, it's uncommon in leadership where leaders really make effort to spend a lot of time. I suppose it's easy to get caught up in the meetings and the emails and all the other stuff, and to prioritise spending time with the team.
And frankly, some leaders simply don't have the level of empathy or sometimes the charisma to be able to make those personal connections. And, I see that in some leaders, but certainly the more effective and the more respected leaders are the ones that can touch the hearts and the minds of their workers.
I think there's an earlier point you made about whether it can be a learned skill. I think you're right. I do think with effort and commitment, it's possible. So if you genuinely believe that that's what you want to do, even though it's not something you might be good at the time, if you believe it's important as a leader and you make time for it, you will get better at it, no question. But I think it's the recognition that this part of leadership is actually really important and spending some time in trying to get better at it.
That's right. And what we're touching on there perhaps is the art of blind spotting, being able to work out where your deficiencies lie as a leader, technically and socially perhaps. Dr. Kirsten Ferguson talks about 3 practices of blind spotting. She talks about making sure you are intellectually honest, in other words, acknowledging the fact that you don't know everything and people don't expect you to. Being curious, you mentioned this word before, being willing and ready to explore alternative ways of doing things to achieve a better outcome, and not being so, not having your ego resist the ability to explore alternatives. And the third practice of blind spotting is flexibility, being ready and willing to pivot and adjust in the face of evidence that you should do. So blind spotting, I think, is such an important concept for anybody really to take hold of, but particularly leaders.
Yeah, I think it's something that you can get better at with practice. But I might just share a moment that I had with my team, which is quite useful. So I think deliberately creating a moment where you are vulnerable and people can tell you where you're not doing things well. I think that's important. And there's lots of different ways to do it. Of course, heaps of books written about this topic. First of all, it's just recognizing I need to do this. And, I try to do it at least once a quarter where we've got a deliberate session where the team tells me what I'm not good at. So I can get better at it because, often, as you mentioned, you just don't know. So one of the examples is we've got an offsite day every 90 days to reset and focus on our next quarter goals. And one part of that is we talk to the team about the values, and the team score me against how I'm tracking against the values. We've got quite a simple process. We call it the bar. So it's imagine a high jump bar you have to get across. And it's whether you always display the value or mostly it's a plus. Sometimes it's a plus minus and rarely it's a minus. So really quite simple scoring system. We've got 5 values and you've got to score at least a plus minus in no more than 2, a plus minus. The rest must all be pluses. And if you've got a minus, then you're below the bar. So the team scored me in 2 of my values, a plus minus, and one of them was actually be yourself. So it's very interesting. So I didn't expect that. And I said to them, okay, well, so why did you guys call me a plus minus and be yourself? That's quite a vulnerable moment. Imagine you've got now your 5 or 6 execs around you and everyone writes down on their little notes where you're not good at something and then tell you about the value. And I was part of the team who created the value, so very passionate about the values. And it was just that moment that, they are expecting a vulnerable leader, not a perfect leader. And so it's the authenticity. So what they said to me is I'm not always that authentic as I can be at work. And part of it was still early days in my journey with the team, and we had a couple of new team members. And it just straight feedback to say, look, we don't want a perfect leader, we want an authentic leader. So we just want a bit more of yourself, inside and outside of work. And so I made a real effort to, bring my full self to work, and that made a big difference.
Let me play the devil's advocate. You talk about authenticity, and it's often raised as one of the ideal personal qualities of leadership. What if your authentic self is not very attractive to other people? Is it a matter that you have to role play? You have to fake it until you make it? If your real self is not all that inspiring or attractive?
I think people, your team, their team members will accept most leaders who are not self-interest and acknowledge their own mistakes. And so I think authenticity is just the fact that you are aware that you have got issues that your team is better than you are at. Yeah. And acknowledging that they are better at things than you are, and letting them lead in those things. And there, I don't think there's a perfect formula. It's just the fact that you know that I'm not good at everything. Actually, it's best that I'm not good at everything. I'm going to hire people who are brilliant at stuff, and they all have different skills to bring. And I need to be, I need to know myself well enough to know where I'm not good at stuff. And that's, I think, is the authenticity. So authenticity in my mind is knowing I'm not good at stuff, some things, and those things a team are much better at I am, and let them do where they are good at and be vulnerable.
And now we take a short break to acknowledge our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Halo Civil Engineering. Halo is a multidiscipline civil contractor that specialises in the delivery of complex civil projects across defence, infrastructure, energy and resources. A West Australian company committed to delivering dynamic solutions with a focus on zero harm, while having a positive impact on their industry, clients and the people they serve. For more information, search for Halo Civil Engineering on socials or visit halocivil.com.
Is your business ready to amplify its voice? At Podwave Studios, we offer professional video podcast production services that help you connect with clients, build your brand and grow your audience. From corporate messaging to thought leadership, we've got you covered. Book your session at podwavestudios.au today.
As the only executive search and leadership consulting firm to be admitted membership of the Minerals Council of Australia, Ivy & Gecko is uniquely resourced to advocate for the interests of our exploration, project development and mining clients.
You're the MD of BCI Minerals. Mardie, the project that you lead, is or is soon to become, I believe, the third largest salt producer in the world. A massive project in the northwest of WA. Talk to some of the key challenges that you've faced over the last 3 years that you've been the MD of your company. What have you learned about yourself and how you might improve your leadership impact?
Yeah, it's these large projects are quite interesting. Yeah, so you're quite right. Largest in the world. It'll be third largest in the world. It'll be the largest in Australia, and there hasn't been a salt operation in WA for probably about 3 decades now. The key challenge we faced at the beginning is I was brought into the company shortly after a cost overrun in the project was announced, and that put significant pressure on the organisation. We didn't have a lot of cash. We still had to do a capital raise. We had to do raise debt for the project. None of those things were in place, and still key government approvals were outstanding. So I was facing a situation where we had in some cases only quarter or so cash in front of us, and while we had a plan, there was always this moment of trepidation that if things go south, you've got a problem. What gave me confidence is that we all were in it. We had no choice. We said the easiest way to the other side is through the middle, straight through the middle. So we really focused on first of all, understanding where the cost is going, like understanding the project well enough. So I spent some time. At that time, the previous project director departed the company. I didn't have a replacement straight away. So about 4 months, I was project director and MD. And that was probably the greatest time for me to really get to understand the project well. And then I started slowly hiring my exec team into different roles. And the key bit that I would say, the key takeaway for me is hire the best people that you can afford. Now, that doesn't mean a lot of people, and often you might think, this is above the band that you thought. But if you hire the best people, you need less people, and they can be really focused and they don't get into others' ways. So the first part was to really understand the project and spend some time in the detail. I really obsessed about the detail, to the extent where I can tell you exactly what each of the packages are budgeted for to this day for these projects. That helped me to understand the problem well enough, and then work out what kind of people do we need to hire for the organisation to set us up for success. And so that was the first key bit. The second key bit was to work through environmental approvals. That was hard yakka, but again, finally found the right person, that person be able to, untie that knot for us, which is fantastic. And then now into operations, again, hire some great leaders in the operations team who can, really just run with it. And that gives me such a sense of satisfaction.
Steve Jobs was always insisting on acquiring the very best talent that was available in the global marketplace. I remember him in a book, he said to John Scully, who at the time was the chief executive of PepsiCo, the drinks company. Steve Jobs was trying to lure him across to Apple as CEO. And he said his pitch was to John Scully, do you want to keep selling sugary water all your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world? Steve Jobs seemed to have this amazing way of articulating a value proposition to someone and inspiring them to do something bigger and better for the community, for the world. As a recruiter, I'm sometimes at a bit of a quandary because I've always thought that, yes, it's nice to find the very best people, but it's more important to find the best in people. I look at a lot of a lot of business leaders over my career, and I think, yes, they're very smart, technically and commercially. They're entrepreneurial. They've got a good business sense, but they don't really have the patience or the skill, the art of extracting the very best from people that might not be brilliant, but can do a really good job if they are appropriately mentored and coached. And I still feel that way. And it's a shame because I can see a waste of talent sometimes. Do you have a point of view on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say the best people, I'm not talking about the best people in specific talent. So if you think about a footy player, you're not talking about the best kicker. You're talking about the best kicker for that team. And I think that's where you come, where that point is for me quite, a strong link. It's not the person who's the best at that particular job, but that person is really good at that job and it's going to fit in with your team. And so I think it's both the technical skills, but I often when I start with a business, I rank my team. I list my team on a matrix. On the y-axis, I've got cultural alignment or values alignment. So imagine the top of the y-axis is very aligned to the values, the bottom not so much aligned, and then your x-axis is technical skills. So on the bottom left, not skilled for the role at all, and on the far right, very well suited and right skills. What you're looking for is people in the top right box. So very much aligned with values and very much aligned with their skill set. If you don't have that, the compromise is very much aligned with values and developing in the skills. Not very high skills and not so much aligned with your values. Because the problem is you don't want highly talented individual players. You want a highly talented team. Yes. And ensuring your team fit together is really well, because you can help people bring the skills up. So, as a leader, I've spent a lot of time in different technical functions, so being a project director or a general manager. Now I've got a project director and a general manager reporting to me. And I'm not expecting them to be the best at those two roles, but I want to see how well they work together as a team to create the best outcome. So I think it's right. It's a combination of those, and it's the fit for that team, the best person you can afford from a technical skills and a cultural fit.
Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you raised the concept of values and culture alignment. I was an amateur rower in my school and university days, and I always thought that rowing was the epitome of all team sports, because let's say you've got a crew of eight people. You don't want any individual to stand out. You don't want any rower to be better than the others. They're in sync as a unified team. How do you then hire, or Tammy Miller, your head of HR lady, how do you hire for culture and values alignment?
It's quite a tricky. I think there's a lot of intuition that lies into this. Not as simple as your technical test. While I say that, I think there's still ways to assess that. So we've got I guess, in my view, very practical values, quite simple language values. So if you think about the values, let's pick one: find a way. So I would ask someone in an interview, can you demonstrate, a example of where you found a way to solve a difficult problem that has not been solved in another way? And that helps me to see how the person is looking for a way that's creative. And there's so many examples in our organization where we had to find a way. Up against the wall, difficult problem, something that's tricky that hasn't been done before. And you really need someone who thinks differently. And so asking those particular questions is really important. I think there's another side to it is to be very quick when someone has been in the role. We've got probation for 6 months. When someone has been in the role and it's not working out, to be very quick to recognize that. And our organization is not for everyone. It requires someone who's, willing to work hard, of course, but willing to find creative ways. We don't have set forms and formulas for everything. As a project, many of the problems are quite novel. So it's not a fit for everyone, but you can really inquire around how people are thinking and whether that thought pattern and preference of working will fit in with your organization.
What you're referencing there, I think, is competency-based interview questions, which we in our firm are really big on as well. Andrew Forrest once said, it's not who you hire that matters, it's who you fire that matters. That connects somewhat to your comment about once you've realised that a mistake has been made in the sense that the person does not fit in, let go.
Yeah. And it's also better for them. And it might sound harsh, but often when that is not a fit, it is very uncomfortable for that person as well. So just having an honest conversation is really important. Often the person will come to the same conclusion. And you don't have often, in my view, you probably have 2 out of 10 where you perhaps haven't interviewed correctly or missed some things and not a good fit. And just being quick with those decisions is important.
Should a company's financial reward practices, in other words, how they pay people, reflect compliance with or support for corporate values and culture?
Yeah, 100%. I'm a very strong believer in that. And I'll probably just answer that question in 2 parts. The first part is, and it links a little bit to my earlier comment about hierarchy. It's really important that the incentive system is quite transparent, as transparent as you possibly can be, and that it's as common as possible. So when I started with BCI, we had something called the project milestone bonus. It was only allocated for project people and some of the execs. And quickly I recognized, well, actually everyone in the organization contributes to the project success, because at BCI we are the project. That's our only asset. So we changed it where everyone in the organization has got access to a project milestone bonus, and it's quite substantial. Think about some of our administrative staff. They've got a bonus of, say, about 20% of their base salary per annum that's just linked to the project milestone bonus. That wasn't there before.
That's very meaningful.
The results I saw was astounding. You have people, I walk in the office and we were talking at a while, this red footy was with the approvals team, and that's also where the face comes from. And so those of you who can't see online, there's a little Wilson face on this beautiful Sharon ball. And that was painted by the daughter of the person who's responsible for approvals in the organization. She said, "You've had this ball for so long, he's your friend." So approvals took a long time. So when I walk in the office and I chat to Sean about the approvals, you can see everyone is listening, because they want to know if we're going to get progress, because they know that was linked to the project milestone bonus. So I think a simple symbol like that, first of all, it's not just for execs, it's for everyone, and everyone makes a difference. It makes people very, very interested in what that success is like. So I think that's critical. I think the other part to that is you have to really make sure that the reward system is quickly and soon after the success has been achieved. I think often what we struggle, and certainly in large organizations it's quite limiting, you end up with incentive structures and systems that are quite long dated, and you don't get the rewards soon after the action has happened. And there's lots of different and meaningful ways to address those things where an action has happened. We've got something we call the Rock Stars. It's a little salt trophy, and it's nominated by people's peers, by their workmates. And once something's been recognized, where someone has delivered or exemplified the values, they nominate their friend for the value. So I think that's one part. What we've changed significantly in our organization is half of your bonus is your results, and half of your bonus is your behavior. So every 90 days we get measured against the bar I mentioned earlier. And then if you are above the bar, for the whole period, you can earn up to 125% of your bonus if you're right up in the top of the organization. And of course, on the flip side, we had people who didn't demonstrate the values and their bonus was halved or even a quarter.
So your reviews are held on a quarterly basis?
Yeah, correct. So we've got our values review is once a quarter. We still have the annual bonus structure, but every 90 days we check in on the values.
Interesting.
We mark them, and that goes then to the end of the year, and that becomes half of your bonus. So it's a multiplier. So let's say you get, make it $50,000 a year for your annual bonus. $25,000 of that is your KPIs, and $25,000 is your values. But it's a multiplier. So if you deliver the values all the time, you get multiplied by 1. If you're a superstar, you get 1.25.
Wow.
So it's a direct result and impact.
That's an innovative practice. I've not heard of that on such a regular basis, a quarterly basis, assessing and reviewing values alignment. I like it.
There's quite a bit of logic. So we use a system called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and that's a system that is designed around 90-day sprints. And the logic is that, as humans, we can focus well for about 90 days around goals, but then we start to fray around the edges. We might lose a bit of focus, and so we reset every 90 days. And we also reset around our rocks, which is basically our key focus areas for the quarter, and around the values.
Time's running away, but I've got a few questions left. I often like to talk with our guest, David, about the frustrations, the challenges, not so much within your own business, but within the mining industry. I'm sure you're aware of it. The Fraser Institute publishes an annual survey globally of the attractiveness of mining jurisdictions for investment. WA as a jurisdiction has been well up there for a long time. Certainly in the top 3, 4, 5 jurisdictions. Most recently, however, we were ranked 17th globally. 2 years before that, we were first. Clearly, investors are scrutinising our track record of performance in terms of easing the pathway from discovery through to development of a project. From your point of view, what do we need to do on a state and federal level to encourage more investors to allocate their capital towards WA projects?
Yeah, David, I think it's quite simple. I spent a fair bit of time overseas, and one of the countries that I engage a lot with and visit a lot is Indonesia. And fascinating, neighbour very close to the north, and the changes that country has been able to witness, for us as an industry, is actually quite stark. So think about the nickel industry. I think that's quite well known with your listeners, what's happened there. Not too long ago, I was also in Indonesia visiting an island to the north of Indonesia where they're replicating their nickel success in aluminium. And I think the aluminium difficulties is quite well written in the media recently. And my view with that is the solution is quite simple. What they do is they create a cost-effective power structure. So you need energy. For any of industry, you need energy. So where you can get cost-effective energy, you've got good tax structures. So it's incentivized for people to be taxed companies as tax divisions because it's a big cost to manage. So that's the second one. And then the speed from incubation to production. And that relates to approvals. I think, again, a discussed topic here in WA. But if you get an area where your power is cheap, you've got low tax, and you get fast through approval processes, that means you're going to attract investment because people think about the return on investment, and a big part of that is how long does it take from my money that I've put in until I start to get return on that. And that doesn't mean we have to compromise, where companies get away with not paying a lot of tax, or where we wreck the environment by creating, low efficient or inefficient power structures. But it's thinking, in a decade, we want investment in WA, and those 3 elements attracts investment, whether that money comes from the US, whether that money comes from Asia, whether money comes from Europe. Those are the 3 measures that they're looking for: low cost base and high return investment. So I think it's quite simple.
It is. Well, you say it's simple. Some would argue it's complicated. I mean, yes, we do have high energy costs. We do have high labour costs relative to other jurisdictions like Indonesia. We also have, we show some semblance of care about the environment as well. Less so in other jurisdictions where, lots of dirty coal is used in the production and the environment is, a wasteland at the end of it. It is a dilemma, isn't it?
I think there's two parts to it. So I agree with you, David, that there are the jurisdictions we compete with have got different rules. I mean, this is part of why I live here with my family in Australia. It's a safe country. It's a country that cares for where we live and how we live. So absolutely. But speed doesn't mean compromise. It means efficiency of process. And so, if you, and I'll give you an example, our groundwater management plan took at least 16 versions. And we got to the same outcome that we started with. That's 2 years later. So that didn't create a better outcome for the environment. It was just a slow, inefficient process. And I think if, and of course, industry plays a role. We can help with that, making those things more efficient. The rules, or the go, no go, can still be absolutely the same. But it's the journey of how you get there that makes the difference. And being efficient in that process and how we deal with questions, how frequently the questions get asked, how the processes are, there's so much duplication. Duplication is, you think about when you're an organization, you want to remove waste. We call it waste in the Japanese, with the Japanese terms. You remove duplication. As soon as you remove duplication, you don't compromise on the quality of your vehicle you're getting. You're making the production line shorter. So it's focusing on those things. That's on the approval side. On the energy side, I think there's a long debate to be had. I'm a strong proponent of, I'm an engineer, right? So I think about the energy in, energy out. We've got a property. We're off grid. We've got batteries there. We've got solar. That's our only power source. We've got a backup Jenny, but we use batteries and solar all the time. But it's inefficient. The capital that I deployed there is not capital that business would be willing to invest. Just to give you an example, I've got about 32 kilowatt of battery power. That battery power cost me nearly $40,000. It's 2 hours of my air conditioner. That's it. So that's just because batteries doesn't create energy. So I think if you think about energy efficiency, and I'm a fan of nuclear. I think it's a very efficient way to generate energy. And you just put two submarines next to each other, and you can quickly realize which one has got more energy efficient. So I think maybe it might not happen in my generation, but as a humankind, we're going to come to that conclusion at some point in the future.
You're South African. To what extent is nuclear in the energy mix of South Africa?
So growing up, Koeberg has been a big power plant in the Cape Town region of South Africa. Unfortunately, that technology has not developed a lot since probably in the early 90s. Yeah. But it was certainly a big part of the energy mix back then. And I think, it's early days, but I think as a human race, we are creative to no end. And I think this climate conundrum is going to be solved. It's just a matter of time. Yes. And it's a matter of being open-minded about the solution.
Yes.
And really thinking through how we can solve that. And that's find a way as the value that play there.
You're an optimist, I can tell. And I do know on the project process approval side that people like Warren Pierce, the CEO of AMEC, and Tanya Constable from the Minerals Council of Australia, both of whom have been on the show, are working very hard advocating on behalf of the mining industry to reduce the level of duplication across the state and federal regulation bodies to try and simplify and speed up the approval process. It's such an important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of time for both Warren and Tanya. I do engage with them very regularly, and absolutely they're doing a great job for the industry. Yeah. It's, unfortunately, I think part of the challenge we have in Australia, it's a pretty short political cycle. Yeah. And some of these decisions are probably 3 or 4 political cycles required, strategy requires. And I think this is where, countries like China, they've got a different structure. And while I might not support that democratically, it's more efficient in terms of making decisions. And I think there's something to be thought.
There's a lot to be said for 10-year planning cycles.
That's right.
Instead of these ridiculous 3-year political cycles where a government does what it can for the first year and then it begins the election campaigning mode again.
Yeah, and I do feel for them, because if you think about that's their job, right? Mm-hmm. So it's about how do I keep my job and how do I think about my job for the next 3 years. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a fundamental part of how our democracy is set up. But I think there's ways one can accommodate longer term planning that can be bipartisan.
Here's some rapid fire questions, David. If you could invite a much admired leader, living or deceased, to your home for dinner, who would it be? And what would be the most important question you'd ask them? Well,
this one is definitely Nelson Mandela. So it's, of course, I never met him personally. I was still a young child when he was an important leader. Yeah. But my view is in that time, as my earlier comments, I think civil war was avoided in South Africa, and I just can't imagine how the country would have been different today had that play out. So the question I would ask him is, how on earth did you avoid civil war in a country that had such different diverse views at that time?
Yeah. Great choice, and a very common choice amongst my guests. The question I would ask him if he came to my place for dinner would be, how on earth do you not feel so incriminating and why don't you feel revengeful towards the people that put you inside that jail on that rock for whatever it was, 25 years? The Christian principle of forgiveness.
Forgiveness, that's right.
Is a beacon that shines bright, or did shine bright in that man.
Yeah, true.
Who's the wisest person you've met?
Well, I'm going to say that Mr. Murray that I spoke about earlier, my teacher, he had a wisdom that I still admire today.
How do you keep yourself informed?
Podcast is definitely something I enjoy. I do travel a fair bit, and I do enjoy leadership podcasts. So Craig Gushal is a great podcast host that I admire, and he always have these really powerful, punchy leadership podcasts that I can remember, and I apply that to my workplace.
What's a non-fiction book that you found very valuable?
There was a book written by Cyril Poison, I think is how you pronounce his surname, Poison, and it's an Aussie author, and it's Live Smarter, Work Better. Very practical book about how to be more efficient at work, more efficient meetings, how to deal with your inbox better, and I still apply that today. Actually, every time I start a new role or have a new executive assistant, I give that to that person to read so they can understand how I operate.
If you were to write your own book, what would be the subject matter of it?
Don't read your CC emails. I think there's so much time spent wasting reading material that's irrelevant.
How often do you look at your emails?
I never look at my CC emails. That's one of my biggest tips that I would give listeners is I ignore them completely. And there's a very interesting, if you search, why did I CC you, and you see a little pie chart, there'll be less than 5% that I thought it would be useful. Lots of other reasons why you get a CC email. So I'd encourage you to try that. Tell your boss you're not going to look at CC emails before you do that, but it just creates so much space for focusing on what is important.
So answer my question, how often do you look at your emails?
I probably spend about half an hour a day on it. And I try and keep my inbox to below about 1,500 emails.
And is it at set times during the day that you look at your emails?
Yeah, so usually early morning. I'm a morning person. I get a bit of exercise in the morning, and then I try and spend about half an hour to an hour.
Well, you're very disciplined, very disciplined. What are you most optimistic about?
Well, I mentioned earlier the climate conundrum. I think that issue has been so politicized across the world, and unfortunately, good taxpayers' dollars wasted on things that's not going to work. But I've got so much positivity about the creativeness of the humankind. And, we see now ChatGPT and other, AI technology that's taking off. Again, just such a next leap in our technological advances. For us to continue to create ways to be more efficient, more effective with the use of energy. Energy creates everything. Coming from a poor country, if you don't have electricity, if you don't have power, it just changes your life, your quality of life. Sometimes hard to see in Australia, but if you are in Africa or India, so it's critical. People need more power, and And I believe that we're going to find a way to do that efficiently.
And these AI data centres require so much electricity, don't they?
Incredible. I was speaking to a supplier of generators, diesel generators, in the US. Their biggest sale right now of Cat engines, V12 Cat engines, are actually going to data centers. So it comes back to my point about power, right? The humankind is going to be more and more hungry for power. We're going to find more efficient ways to supply that.
ChatGPT has been around for just 3 years, and I read somewhere that there are now 1 billion regular users of ChatGPT in the world, and that's in the context of 8.1 billion world population. So in other words, about 12% of humanity, most of which don't have access to the technology anyway, is a regular daily user of ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's incredible, David. I use it. I write monthly reports to the board, but what I would say is it's not as good as humans, and it will never be as good as humans. So my view is you have to let it do its thing. It makes you more efficient, but you always have to put the personal touch at the end. You always have to double check and read it. And as it gets better, right? Of course, it gets more efficient and it saves us a lot of time. But I think the human interface is always going to be part of it.
Apparently, in Japan, there are 2 listed companies that have appointed algorithms to their board of directors. And those algorithms have voting rights.
That's quite incredible. I think with leadership, a decision is not always a black and white decision. It requires human intuition. And there's such great examples. If they've done some really good case studies on people with brain injuries and to ask them to make very simple decisions. And where the emotional cortex has been damaged, they find decision-making very hard. And that means decision-making is not just a simple black and white answer, not simple logic. It requires intuition and human experience. And I think that's going to be part of as long as humanity exists.
So you and I won't be replaced by algorithms anytime soon.
Leadership is very hard to replace.
What energizes you?
Well, I think the thing that gives me most energy is when I see teams who have struggled through a difficult problem and came out victorious. And I'll give one example. So you're a West Coast Eagles supporter. Imagine when they win the grand final again. Like how much joy would it be for you to see they've been having years of difficulty and forming up and training and getting the right leadership in place and so on and so forth. That success is so sweet. So for me to see a team, that's why I do enjoy turnaround roles, been through difficulty and then having a win and then believing in themselves again and then going from success to success. There's nothing better.
Do you know what would give me even more satisfaction than the next West Coast Eagles premiership?
Tell me.
Seeing that the Fremantle Dockers never, ever win one.
Oh, I'd love to have you in a conversation with Brian O'Donnell, for chairman. He might have been on the board of the Dockers for a little while.
Last question, David. What advice would you give your 25-year-old self to help you lead a better quality life?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think really importantly is don't sweat the small stuff. I remember in my first year, I just left school. I went to work as a physical labourer in the mines for the first year. I saved every penny. I starved myself from any joy the first 12 months. Saved all my dollars up. I bought a car. I got my first car. Of course, my parents couldn't buy me a car. It was only 6 months later, I was writing a math exam my first year. Car got stolen. Didn't have insurance. Didn't have a loan on it, luckily. But I was back on my feet. Actually back on my bicycle. And I was 3 months on my bicycle and they stole my bicycle too. I was back on my feet. And it quickly realized, well, hang on. And I thought it was the end of the world. Now, you think, decades later, that thing was just pale in significance. So it's just don't sweat the small stuff and keep on doing what you enjoy and work hard.
I think that's really good advice. David Boshoff, I've enjoyed this conversation. I've learned things about you that I wouldn't have dreamed would be true in terms of your background. And I think I've learned some lessons as well in good management and good leadership practices. So thanks very much for being our guest on Hearts and Minds.
Thank you, David. I enjoyed the conversation.
And thank you also to Podwave Studios for recording and producing this program, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Hearts and Minds. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a rating or share it with a friend. And don't forget to follow us and connect on social media for updates on all of our upcoming guests. I'm Alana Bray-White, and I look forward to you joining us for our next episode.